treat you to sit back and enjoy some classic comedy from the golden days, presented by a gentleman who genuinely believed that entertainment was the key ingredient to good in television, Bill Cotton.
Mr. President, Lady Weldon, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'm quite unashamedly very proud to have been asked by the Royal Television Society to deliver this year's Huw Weldon Lecture. Huw was not only someone I was fortunate enough to count among my friends, but he was a wise counsellor both professionally and personally. It's appropriate that one of these lectures should deal with entertainment because Huw was an entertainer in his own right, and as controller of programs he understood the importance of quality entertainment, and he was lavish in his encouragement and support. He had in his early days at the BBC gained a taste of show business as the presenter of All Your Own, a children's talent show which was uncompromisingly unpatronising to the children taking part. Here he is, after a bit of skiffle, talking to Jimmy Page, who later became internationally known as a member of the Led Zeppelin group.
Well, we don't care what mother knows, we're gonna play that drum and anyhow, mama knows around on drumming and sounding.
All drummers have the same look, don't they? They have this kind of preoccupied look. Why?
Well, you have such a lot to do that you haven't got any time to smile.
Now then, you're called what?
J.T. Skiffle Group.
And you come from?
Epsom.
What are your two names? Yours is?
James Page and...
David Housman.
Both from Epsom?
Yes.
What are you going to do when you leave school? Take up skiffle?
No, I want to do, well, biological research.
Do you?
You knew that popular entertainment was the heart of British public service broadcasting, and the shows that were developed under his leadership are still in demand by audiences all over the world. He also understood the importance of quality contemporary writing, especially in comedy. He once commented to me that it was his opinion that in 100 years' time, social historians seeking an insight into Britain in the 1960s would turn first to programs like Steptoe and Son, Till Death and Dad's Army, before anything else which was being produced at the time. As a producer himself, he was fascinated by the program-making process and was quick to recognize the brilliance when he saw it. A classic point that he would make was the importance of casting. He would use as an example Dad's Army. David Croft, the co-writer and producer of the shows, had cast the two central roles absolutely against type, asking the upper-class, languid, sophisticated John Le Mesurier to play the sergeant and the pompous, middle-class Little Englander Arthur Lowe to play the captain. The tension and contrast between those two roles were indeed pivotal to episode after episode of this huge... Huw, something of a star himself, was also a firm believer in the star system. That is to say, he recognized talent and backed it to the hilt. Sir Ian Trethowyn is fond of telling a story against himself, which will illustrate the point. Ian had joined the BBC from ITN, and he felt he should present Panorama. But Paul Fox offered it to Robin Day. Very hurt, Ian talked it over with Huw. Well, said Huw, you're quite right to be aggrieved, but Paul is quite right to book Robin Day. He is a star, you are not. Huw did, however, convince Ian to stay with the BBC, and as we know, he later became managing director of radio, then television, director general, and is now the chairman of Thames Television. Not a bad consolation prize. Huw was first and foremost a believer in that style of public service broadcasting which had been articulated by that legendary broadcasting figure, Grace Wyndham Goldie, during one of those periodic moments of depression and crisis to which all great companies and corporations are prey. It was 1956, and Gerald Beadle had just arrived as the new director of television to find the morale of the television service at a low ebb. In the areas where the newly established independent television was operating, BBC was losing the battle for audience share to the tune of 70% to ITV, to 30% to the BBC. A meeting of production executives was called to seek a solution. During the course of this, Grace, then a major figure in talks department, stood up and exposed the problem very simply. The trouble in the BBC is, she said, it is considered vulgar to be popular. I've always thought that that was the moment when BBC television actually entered the area of competition so essential to the new duopoly. It is important at this juncture, however, to make one further observation on the history of the BBC's commitment to popular entertainment. There is a view expressed that the calculated pursuit of the mass audience, which BBC television conducted with both talent and dedication in the late 50s and throughout the 60s, represented some kind of falling away from the stimulating, informative, educational service of the Reithian heyday. The facts, of course, do nothing to support this view. During the war and after it, the BBC was known to the British public through its radio services. Of these services, by far the largest audiences were attracted to the Forces programme, which later became the Light programme. Their whole schedule was based on the appeal of popular drama, music and comedy. During the 30s and the 40s, even the early 50s, BBC Radio created many of the major names in British popular entertainment. From Arthur Askey and Stinker Murdoch in Bandwagon, to Tommy Hanley and Itmar, to the Goons, to Dead Ray, to Much Binding, to Round the Horn. The list is long and legendary, and it provided the British public with a substantial number of its major box office stars. For a huge majority of license payers at the time, that was what they paid their money for, and that was what they expected to get. The executives and the producers who ran the Light programme during those years didn't have that much to learn from the new moguls of commercial television about how to appeal to the British public. Grace Wyndham Goldie was not suggesting an opportunist retreat from all those principles which had made the BBC great, but rather a revival of that confidence and talent which had made it so widely admired. The application of quality to popular contemporary entertainment was and remains a cornerstone of the BBC television services programme policy. In the examples I will cite, BBC programmes tend to be predominant. This is not because I believe them to be better than ITV's, but purely because they're generally closer to my own experience. My story starts in 1956, when I joined the BBC television service, then just a year into the new duopoly experience. ITV had been established by the new Conservative administration to extend broadcasting's options by the addition of a responsible and professional opposition to the BBC. While ITV was undoubtedly offered the opportunity to make substantial sums of money, it was nonetheless obliged to produce programmes in the United Kingdom for the United Kingdom viewers, utilising United Kingdom talent. By making extensive new calls on British writers, actors, dancers, musicians, producers, and so on, the production base of the British industry was almost doubled overnight. Whether it was luck or judgment, no one knows. But the end result of this new system was that the viewers found themselves with two channels, both of which could commission a wide range of programs, plan them with the confidence of the long-term financial security, and place them within a hard-edged competitive schedule. The British market of some 40 million viewers could look forward to a guaranteed continuing choice of programming, predominantly made by British talent in British studios with the British audience specifically in mind. It is worth remembering that such a situation is very much the exception rather than the rule in world television. This is not to claim, however, that all the BBC's biggest hits were home-produced. In the mid-70s, during my time as controller of BBC One, the corporation undertook a wide-ranging series of Meet the Public events. Senior executives travelled around the country to town halls and schools to answer questions and address criticisms from their audience. One of the questions which I most frequently had was this: why don't you get rid of all that American rubbish from our screens? At first, knowing how popular our US imports were, I was thrown by this. So at one of the meetings, I asked, would those people in the audience who wanted to see Starsky and Hutch taken off put their hands up? Or Kojak? Or MASH? Or the Rockford Files? The answer was always very few. The fact is that the belief that all American television is rubbish, like the belief that all the BBC's endeavours before the arrival of commercial television were deeply worthy and intellectually sound, had little evidence to support it. In the mid-50s, British television was dominated by entertainment shows from America. America is and always has been the greatest entertainment-producing nation in the world. Let us remind ourselves of some of those shows which were around in the 50s and are still a channel controller's delight today.
Mr. Yes?
Mr. Benny, we're from the Department of Internal Revenue.
It's true. Ricky's been drafted.
Now, Lucy, you've got to be brave.
I'll be brave.
Is that being brave?
It is for a coward like me.
Oh, George, the matrimonial bureau is sending over a husband for Jane. So I think you better stay here and have a little man-to-man talk with him. You know, tell him about the pigeons and the flies.
Pigeons and the flies?
Well, at his age, he probably knows about the birds and the bees.
Birds and bees. Well, I hope he shows up.
Oh, he will. You know, I'm so excited. Love weddings.
Oh, I love weddings, too,
Do you remember when we got married?
Of course I do.
And remember that cute little hotel we went into at Niagara Falls?
I'll never forget it.
Oh, yes. What a thrill. You know, it was the first time I'd ever tasted Canadian bacon.
Hardly anything like rubbish there. And yet the premise of each of those shows was very simple. Jack Benny's meanness, Gracie Allen's dottiness, and the premise of the Lucy shows was she spent 20 years trying to get into Ricky's band. As a fresh young television producer in the mid-50s, a visit to America to view their output was like going on a trip to Fairy Wonderland. They had journalism of the quality provided by Ed Murrow, drama of the standard of four-star Playhouse, excellent documentaries and current affairs programs. But it was their entertainment programs which opened my eyes and taught me so much. They had some excellent game shows. What's My Line in its British version became one of the biggest and earliest hits in the entertainment in this country. They also had the Perry Como Show, a prototype which established the style of the popular middle-of-the-road singer on television. They had format shows like This Is Your Life. They had talk shows like the Jack Parr Show, a form then unknown here. Americans, by the way, to this day are amused by our seemingly dismissive term for these programs as chat shows. They had popular music shows like the legendary American Bandstand. They had variety shows of the power and quality of the Ed Sullivan Show. Finally, as we've seen, they had comedy, and comedy to cherish at that. How about this for a script writing credit on a weekly turnaround sketch show? Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, Neil Simon, Danny Simon, Larry Gelbart, Norman Lear, and Mel Tokin. They all worked together on a show not seen here till much later, Sid Caesar's Show of Shows. What was the system, one might ask, that produced this explosion of television excellence? Well, to me, it looked remarkably like a duopoly. Two wealthy men, who also happened to be committed broadcasters with a deep pride in their networks, were effectively running American television at that time. Bill Paley at CBS and the General, David Sarnoff, at NBC. Of course they were commercial animals, businessmen through and through, but their business was television, and they believed in it. But nothing is forever, and this perhaps cozy arrangement was brushed aside as ABC entered the frame. The third network had to attack to establish a market share, and under the direction of that past master of aggressive scheduling, Fred Silverman, attack it most certainly did. Silverman raised the idea of weekly stripping to a fine art. He virtually invented back-to-back scheduling and the miniseries. By contrasting the two now radically different systems operating on either side of the Atlantic, I came to a basic definition of the essential difference between public service broadcasting and the commercial television business. The former gets money to make programs, whilst the latter makes programs to get money. Meanwhile, back in Britain, times were changing too. As the duopoly settled into place, the independent television companies invested in programs and forced the BBC to reassess the balance of its resources. Firstly, between radio and television, and then between popular and minority programs, a difficult equation. In the United States, network radio went to the wall. Here, thank heavens, the BBC maintained a strong radio tradition which has remained the breeding ground and custodian of much that is best in broadcasting. At the same time, the BBC increased their investment in television, and in particular in the area of popular entertainment. Their commitment to quality set standards which ITV was determined to challenge. The result on the screen, as far as comedy was concerned, was excellence combined with huge popular success on both channels.
All right, you idle old layabouts.
What's going on here?
Oops, sir. All right, why aren't you idle layabouts playing about idle like idle layabouts? And what do you suppose you think you're doing with them rifles?
Oh, we're cleaning them, sir.
Squad, have hands shot. Officer, take this lot over. Take them over to the rubbish dump and start rubbishing. Move, come on, higher. Move. You should be there by now. Now, that's what I call volunteering.
The new system, of course, had other effects on the ecology of the business. Most program makers had long been aware of the importance of writers in the production process. In the earliest days of radio, comics in particular had tended just to come on and perform their club or musical routines. These were often self-compiled over years of touring the halls. But if one was to appear week in and week out on a radio series, the need for a scriptwriter became paramount. Accordingly, writers held an acknowledged place in the radio production system. However, the fact that BBC Radio was their only real port of call, combined with the traditional reticence of musical performers to over-lionize their writers, had conspired to keep their salaries and their prestige comparatively low. The exceptions were Ted Kavanagh, who wrote Itmar, and Frank Muir and Dennis Norden, who wrote Take It From Here. However, under the competitive conditions of the new duopoly, the fight for writers to create new comedies and feed existing stars was well and truly on. A new breed of high-profile, much sought-after practitioners arose. Their guild motto, "In the beginning there was the word," now suddenly had a very real ring of truth to it. Muir and Norden transferred from radio to television, so did Gorton and Simpson, and they all became almost as famous as the stars they wrote for. Indeed, the team that wrote the first Morecambe and Wise shows, Sid Green and Dick Hills, actually got their own show as frontmen, while both Frank and Dennis remain well-known faces in their own right to this day. What started as a trickle soon became a stream, and Britain now possesses some of the finest writers of comedy in the world. Eric Sykes, Johnny Spate, Richard Waring, Clement and Frenay, Eddie Braben, Carla Lane, John Sullivan, Esmond and Larby, Roy Clark, Richard Curtis and Ben Elton, and many more. Such writers were particularly crucial in the early days to BBC's television light entertainment department. Its then boss, Ronnie Walvin, had seen the cash-rich ITV companies attract a galaxy of major variety stars. It was he who decided that the BBC would strike back with a string of top-class situation comedies, and he set about attracting the best of the new writers into his group. He also made the decision to favor the casting of good, often little-known actors in the central roles. So began the emergence of a whole tradition of classically trained straight actors as major comedy stars. Two in particular are always remembered. As with many of our business's success stories, they emerge more by luck than design. Let me explain why and how. After the perhaps unique impact of the first few series of Hancock's Half Hour on television, Tony Hancock decided to change direction and seek new writers. This left the BBC with contractual commitments to Gorton and Simpson, and it was decided that they would write 6 separate comedies under the title Comedy Playhouse. I suspect because their series was slightly overspent, they included a very simple two-hander called The Offer. 2 actors were duly cast in the central roles, and Gorton and Simpson, having already written for Hancock, the shows most often quoted as the zenith of achievement in television comedy, were about to commence on the first run of the only serious rival for that title at the time.
All right, you want your back scrubbed, do you? Right. You want your back scrubbed, do you? What are you going to do? I'll scrub your back for you, mate. No, you didn't. Come on.
The next time it'll be warm.
It's your rule. Where's the colour of my lotion? Where did I get a son like you?
It's her. It's Delia. Come on, hurry up, get up to bed.
You bastard can't move.
Will you get up? Niggas, you can't come in here and see you in the nude. Here, come on, put that round you. Come on, get up. If you don't get up to bed, I'll take your teeth away.
Yeah, you think you're tough, don't you? I'll get you one day.
Get up to bed.
One day I'll get you. You've got bad blood in it. Nobody'll blame you. I'll creep in one night and what? You get a half a yard of gas pipe right across your throat. You wonder what it is? Right across your throat. And don't forget my cocoa.
The 2 actors who played Steptoe and Son were Wilfred Bramble and Harry H. Corbett, who are now sadly both dead. But many other performers have enjoyed sustained careers in television comedy while remaining respected as serious stage, television, radio, and film actors. For example, this quartet, Richard Briers, Felicity Kent, Penelope Keith, and Paul Eddington, in the Esmond and Larby series, The Good Life.
Now, that is a miracle.
If you so much as sniggers, I'm going straight back indoors.
Margot, we couldn't be more grateful.
Even I can see that this is a genuine emergency. After all, what are friends for? Mind you, this will be the first and last time, so make good use of me.
Right. Run of beans in the box, please. Well, if that's the best you can do, we'll be here till Christmas.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Goodbye.
No, Margot. Oh, Tom, for goodness sake, that's the most ungrateful thing I've ever heard. I mean, Margot's doing her best. She's the odd one out here. It's not her fault if she's all weak and feeble.
Weak and feeble, am I?
The only problem I had with that show was whether at the end of the recordings of the first series we should put the man's garden back as we found it, or pray that the series would be a success and keep it as it was, ploughed up. It was left to me to make the decision. Of course, I decided to put the garden back as we found it. We dug it up 6 months later. Throughout the 60s, on both sides of the duopoly, a wide range of entertainment program continued. There were the personality shows from people like Benny Hill, Dave King, not him, Arthur Haynes, Dave Allen, Eric Sykes, not him, David Frost, Harry Seacombe, Jimmy Tarbuck, Bruce Forsyth. Oh, all right.
Wait, you
There were also numerous musical shows reflecting the explosion of British musical talent in that decade. It does seem to me a great shame there are so few musical shows in the schedules nowadays. More so at a time when the audience's enthusiasm for musical entertainment of all kinds has been so obviously demonstrated in our theatres and on radio. Get them right, and they will always be popular.
Undoubtedly up. So, on we go to the next one.
Don't you worry about what's on your mind, oh man. I'm in no hurry, I can take my time, oh man. I'm going red, tongue's getting tired, I'm up ahead, my mouth's getting dry, I'm high, better try, oh man. Over the points, 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 over the points. The 6-5 special steaming down the line.
This gallant band was organised by Slattery's eldest son, a noble-minded poacher with a double-breasted gun. And many a head was open, aye, and many an eye was shut, when learning to manoeuvre with the Slattery mounted foot.
Just about a year ago, I went out on the road, seeking my fame and fortune. I was looking for a pot of gold. You know that things got bad and things got worse, and I guess you know the tune. Oh, I'm stuck in a low dial again.
It might be interesting at this point to compare the way programs got on the air then with the way it happens now. In the 60s, as head of Light Entertainment, if it seemed a good idea to do a series with, say, Dave Allen, I would give him a ring, ask him what he was doing in 2 or 3 months' time. If the answer was helpful, I would suggest a series of 6 to 13 shows. He would probably argue the toss over the number. There would be a brush about the money. We'd fix the studio dates, and then we would go to lunch, or dinner, or both. The next day, I'd phone his agent, Richard Stone, and fix the deal. Richard, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, would thank me for keeping him posted. A conversation with the channel controllers to see who wanted it. With any luck, they both did, and we were off to the races. I think most of you here will agree that that is a scenario that is unlikely today. First, there would be a call to the artist's agent. This might lead to a preparatory getting-to-know-each-other lunch between the executive, the agent, the personal manager, and just possibly the artist. If this goes well, and if the artist's co-manager, wife or husband, lawyer and accountant are all agreeable, it might be worthwhile trying to set up a meeting between a possible producer for the show and the artist. At this meeting, they would see if they could get on and whether they could come up with a format. If not a format, maybe a treatment, or at least a concept. Setting up this meeting will probably require at least one lunch with the producer's agent and the sending of a video cassette of the producer's show reel to the artist's agent. If things are really humming, the artist-producer meeting might lead to a think tank session with a writer, involving another lunch, of course. This could then produce a fully formed program proposal. Now all the executive has to do is to find out if the controller of the network has a window for this type of show, get a budget to fit a predefined pot of money, make sure no one else from the regions or the independent unit or indeed another company is offering a similar project. Check out if he is up to his quota on independent access, if not turn the whole thing into an independent production. And finally time his run to hit the BBC's editorials and offers or the ITV's flexibles at the crucial moment. If all goes well, a firm commitment to an off-air pilot could be just around the corner. At this year's Banff's Television Festival, Norman Horowitz, a major American television executive, depressed an audience largely composed of program makers by telling them that getting a first episode of an American series on the network television took an unbroken series of at least 125 consecutive yes decisions. I think we should listen, learn, and inwardly digest. There has to be a simpler way from everybody's point of view. Another crucial difference in those days was the absence of an international dimension. There was little thought of programs having an afterlife, and even if they did, it would certainly never be allowed to compromise the absolute need to satisfy the British public's demand for their own shows made the way they liked them. They did not want to lose Starsky and Hutch, but they certainly did not wish to lose the Sweeney. In any case, the largest English-speaking market, the United States, was virtually ruled out by considerations of content. The Americans have never shared our audience's acceptance of another country's dialects and slang. The nuances of Arthur Daly's wit and Bette Lynch's sarcasm do not go down well with American buyers. Another impediment, of course, was sheer numbers. In British television, 30 to 36 episodes in 5 years was the sort of total lifespan of a situation comedy. The Cosby Show is now in its 6th series. That's about 150 shows. Roseanne only started in 1988, and it will chalk up nearly 50 episodes by the end of this year. Our methods of production and our wish to have all episodes written by the original writers meant we could not cope with those numbers. Meanwhile, back in America, as the grip of all-out commercial war tightened on the 3 networks, horror stories filtered back here. Successful series pushed on and on well past their creative lifespan. Potentially good new series killed off by one set of bad overnights. Teams of writers locked away in rooms, cloning the few new successes which did emerge. In general, a world of cutthroat competition. And yet, doubtless against the background of hours of indifferent and repetitive broadcasting, the gems still shone out. Laugh-In and MASH being 2 prime examples.
Hey, wasn't that Gene Kelly? He must be here to introduce that new dance craze, the Farkle.
Oh, no! Bert Burple's gonna do the Farkle.
Kelly's a keen kicker, but Bird's a far fancier farkler.
I love your show, Andy, but I gotta tell you, I sure miss Amos. You gotta get some sun, boy. me to pieces.
Major Winchester, I'm terribly sorry. Would you mind stepping outside and scrubbing up?
I kind of doubt that'll be necessary, Major. I just spent 7.5 minutes scrubbing.
Yes, but that was before you touched your nose.
I beg your pardon.
Your nose. You touched your nose. You're no longer sterile. If you operate now, you'll contaminate the field.
Of course, and it's precisely what I would do if, in fact, I had touched my nose, which I didn't.
Major, I saw you touch your nose.
Major, do you think my face is insensate? Don't you think if I had touched my nose, I would have felt it?
I just felt something funny over my lip. Maybe it touched my nose.
You touched his nose, Charles. You'll have to marry him.
Colonel Potter, I clearly saw Major Winchester touch his nose.
You naughty boy.
Colonel, I refuse to spend another 7.5 minutes scrubbing up because of this woman's paranoid hallucinations.
She's a pretty good observer, Winchester.
I did not touch my nose. I did not touch my nose.
You did touch your nose. I saw you touch your nose.
It's the battle of the noses, ladies and gentlemen. Who do you think is the head, Captain Honeycutt?
Well, Winchester was ahead for a while, but he blew it.
Say, that's disgusting.
How am I expected to operate in here if I must continually leave to wash my hands?
Don't touch
your nose!
Idiot.
And there were other characters on American television we might vaguely recognize too. Here are Sanford and Son, but don't they remind you of these two? And how about this TV-created American folk hero of the 1970s?
Yeah. No, I described to a higher law there, meathead, God's law, and God intended man to smoke.
My mother always said if God intended people to smoke, he would have put chimneys on their heads.
Your mother didn't know nothing. She didn't even want you to marry me.
Wait a second. God intended man to smoke?
Certainly. Why do you think God planted tobacco? To make salads, you dope you? That's to smoke. Everything God planted is for man to use.
Then what about marijuana?
God didn't plant marijuana, little girl. It was your Mexican bandits done
Just a hint of an old friend about Mr. Archie Bunker, you might think.
Well, let me ask you a question. Where did Jesus come from? England! Yes, my dear, England. Yes, he did. Look, look, what was the first two English names in the Bible? Mary and Joseph, wasn't it?
Joseph is a Jewish name.
All right, Jesus might have been a bit Jewish on his father's side.
Like you.
I mean, blimey, Mary, you couldn't get a more English name than Mary. Anyway, Joseph wasn't Jesus' father, was he? Joseph, I mean, all he was like, sort of, well, he was like a lodger, wasn't he? Now, God was Jesus' father, and God ain't Jewish, is he? Don't even look Jewish. It's the last thing he would have made himself, and God is Church of England. Oh, makes it the Queen's Church, see? And what he done, he sent Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem to have his son, and thereby to start the Christian faith.
Why do you think that God with all his pull? I mean, he'd have found him a better place to stay than a stable.
Well, there wasn't no room at the inn that night.
Oh, it was Christmas. Everywhere's crowded at Christmas.
Silly Moo!
Yes, the industry had discovered the format deal. British comedies, which would not, we were told, work in the US, were brought up and cloned for that market. The basic setup or format was reworked by teams of American writers into an American context and a more generic formalistic comedy, and produced in runs of up to 26 at a time. Then two of Britain's most successful writers decided to have a go at it for themselves. The Americans had seen and liked Ronnie Barker's Porridge. They planned to reformat it as On the Rocks. But the British writers, Dick Clement and Ian Lafreniere, would only sell the format if they got first crack at writing the American version. Their early efforts met with approval, and they eventually decamped to Los Angeles to write the series entirely by themselves. While they were working on the scripts, I visited Hollywood with Jimmy Gilbert, who was then head of comedy, and one night had dinner with them. They were a little disconsolate. They had written a very funny episode featuring Rita Moreno on a visit to the prison. It had gone very well. Next morning, the network phoned to say they wanted Miss Moreno to be written into the rest of the series. When they explained the difficulties they would have writing a part for a woman in a series about an all-male prison, they were told, "That's your problem, that's why you earn the big bucks." Well, by the end of dinner, we'd convinced them for therapy to write another series of porridge for the BBC in the evenings after work. It turned out just fine. It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. Let's look at the way a well-remembered joke from the very first episode was treated on both sides of the Atlantic. First, on the rocks.
Suffer from any illness?
Bad feet.
Suffer from any illness?
Bad feet.
Paid a recent visit to a doctor or a hospital?
Only for my bad feet.
Are you now, or have you ever been a practicing homosexual?
With these feet?
A1.
A1. Doc, I can barely move.
Fuentes, do me a favor. There is not a guy in this prison who is not trying to finagle his way into a hospital bed, and I am up to my neck.
At least you can move your neck.
Very convincing. Fuentes, see those flasks? I want you to fill one for me.
From here?
Suffer from any illness?
Bad feet.
Suffer from any illness?
Bad feet.
Made a recent visit to a doctor or hospital?
Only with me bad feet.
Are you now, or have you at any time been a practicing homosexual?
What were these feet? I think you'll run off your feet, ain't you, Doc?
I cannot cope, man.
Good job we're not bad feet like mine, eh?
You're A1, I told you. Now, you see those flasks over there? I want you to fill one for me.
What, from here?
In the late 70s, a new force began to emerge which would radically alter the landscape of the American industry. Pay cable arrived, and with it promised to extend the viewer's choice in the most remarkable manner. Up to 100 channels were proposed to compete with the big three networks. There would be specialist film channels, music channels, sports channels, arts channels, 24-hour news services, dedicated business services, even a home shopping channel. Television was to enter a new age of choice and diversity for the viewer, and milk and honey for the broadcaster. One development about this time, in my opinion, proved particularly crucial. Thornton Bradshaw at RCA appointed Grant Tinker to head their NBC network division. Tinker was then the head of the highly respected Mary Tyler Moore Studios. Major corporate decisions were back in the hands of a heavyweight program maker, and NBC embarked on a new roster of projects which set the stage for the arrival on all the networks of shows of the courage and quality of Hill Street Blues, St. Elsewhere, Cosby, Golden Girls, Cheers, Family Ties, and Roseanne. Not all of them instant hits. Once again, a clutch of American product, hardly notable for its rubbish quotient. Meanwhile, back here in the early 80s, we added another channel, Channel 4. This made room for another revolution of popular taste, alternative comedy. Alternative comedy, having served its apprenticeship in the pubs and clubs of London's cabaret circuit, now hit our screens.
Yes, this week the Dangerous Brothers are proud to present for you Sir Adrian the Human Cannonball. But a human cannonball with a difference, because this cannonball will be on fire. Careful! In the cannon! He's off his rocker, you know. Completely off my rocker! In the cannon! Get in the cannon! Get an air freshener! There's no time! In the cannon! Right, ladies and gentlemen, it just remains for me to pour in the petrol. Hello. Light the match. Throw it in. Lower the trajectory. Light the fuse. And stand well back in a safe position. Wow! There he goes, ladies and gentlemen! Through the... God! You bastard! Get out of there! Get out of there! Get out of there! Come on, come on! There he goes, ladies and gentlemen! There he goes! Through the window! Through the other window! Through the hoop of fire! Hoop of fire! Hooray! Through the brick wall! Through the brick wall! Through the brick wall! Fantastic evening. Thank you and good night.
In fact, these alternative comedians were just the latest in a noteworthy line of anarchic comedians who pursued a type of performance at odds with the norms of the day. Before the war, there had been the Crazy Gang. After the war, Beyond the Fringe, the Goons, That Was the Week That Was, the Pythons, not the 9 o'clock news. It's long been my belief that every 10 years or so, the British public, especially the young, become bored with the stock diet of entertainment and look around for some spicier fare. This leads to the sudden elevation of bright young talents up to cult status. In time, each group settles down, fragments, and goes on to form establishment patterns of its own. For example, one man who has been involved in the new comedy from the outset, both as a writer and a performer, is Ben Elton.
How do the advert families stay so cheerful? They're all so happy, aren't they? The families on the adverts, they're ecstatic about the clean toilets. They're going into sexual ecstasy over a cup of instant coffee. Are they on drugs? I think they must be. I think they're part of the scourge. They must pump smack, do the stuff, of course. Oh, wow, what an amazingly clean toilet, Mum. Fantastic. Wow, these clothes are really fluffy. Have a bang on that, Dad. Of course they take drugs, yeah. An extraordinary Renault advert where Mr. and Mrs. Posh are dropping off their little kid at the public school, eh? And they drop him off and give him his violin case to show what a sensitive family they all are. And then they're driving home, Dad and Mum in the Renault, and Dad drops his bombshell. He says, I've got something to tell you, darling. It concerns you, the kids, the house, the mortgage. I'm going it alone. I'm starting a new company. Bob's with me, Frank's with me. We've got the backing. And what does this woman reply to this astonishing bombshell, this fait accompli? He's rearranged her life, like it or lump it, bitch. I mean, that silly woman off Cat's Eyes with that irritating voice turns to him and says, oh, darling, that's fantastic. Not, didn't you think you could have told me 6 months ago? You know, if Bob knows, Frank knows, the bank knows, the dog knows. Isn't it about time your wife did, you know? No. She says, oh, darling, that's fantastic. Renault, one of your better decisions. Marrying an arrogant, sexist dickhead, one of your stupider decisions. Dear.
It will not be long before Ben is regarded as part of the comedy establishment, along with Jasper Carrott and Lenny Henry. Hosting Wogan was a good start. Alongside this new comedy, television has still found room for the good, straightforward, beautifully written, beautifully performed, character-based situation comedy, at which it has excelled for so long. Indulging for a moment my great fondness for the well-constructed visual gag, here is a clip from one of the best, the marvellous Only Fools and Whores. And now, at the end of the 80s, we face huge changes and challenges at the very heart of our industry. The market has arrived. The market will decide became a rallying cry, particularly among those who seldom, if ever, watch television. Now, I personally have never known a market to write a sketch or tell a story or sing a song. Furthermore, as I once said to a senior member of the government, I take the view about broadcasting that he took about politics. It is probably a business which runs best on the two-party system. Be that as it may, this system is now ready for change for all sorts of economic, technical, and political reasons. It is certainly true that television has a polymorphic ability to show itself as all things to all people. To politicians, it is essentially a political tool. To journalists, it's a branch of journalism. To the film industry, it is a major outlet. I happen to believe that television, most importantly, is about the creation and dissemination of good drama, both light and serious, good music and dance, both classical and popular, and the creation of laughter. Television must create a sense of well-being and continuity. It must also remain a powerful tool for the maintenance and continuation of an endemic cultural heritage of writing, acting, and production, handed down to us from the age of Chaucer and Shakespeare. To foster and maintain these elements within our broadcast structures requires an act of will, a degree of commitment. The market cannot and will not guarantee it. So this year's Huw Weldon Lecture has been slightly different from this year's McTaggart Lecture as given by Rupert Murdoch. Now, I've been advised not to tangle with Mr. Murdoch. After all, another quick change of nationality and in the blink of an eyelid, he'll be Lord Wapping. Well, like some newspaper proprietors before him who've come to us from foreign climes, there are times I feel he doesn't like us very much. Our money and the power it gives him, yes. Our way of life, no. I was astonished to hear from Mr. Murdoch that I'd been part of an industry that had caused so much damage to Britain, with programs that certainly the British public liked, and I've always understood have decorated screens throughout the world. But mainly I'm left wondering at his seemingly insatiable appetite for confrontation. He no sooner finishes a shouting match with BSB than he's flying off at the terrestrial broadcasters. He's got his 4 networks now on the air. They're all available to any viewer wishing to install the apparatus. Now, surely the audience can and will decide. I see no benefit to our industry in an endless round of slanging matches. It confuses the customer and damages everybody, especially the people who do it. For myself, I remain very optimistic about the future. It is obvious to many of us that the manner in which some of the recent changes have been introduced is having an unnecessary and damaging destabilizing effect. But I have enormous confidence that common sense and the talent of our industry and the voice of the viewer will prevail. We must not allow anything to diminish the production capability of the United Kingdom, which continues to make a unique type of programming within the British cultural tradition, using British talent and craft and aimed specifically at the British audience. What Mr. Murdoch thinks is a major flaw in our television is, in truth, a major asset. We have a long and fascinating history and many great traditions, and they make wonderful drama and comedy. Where would Rowan Atkinson's Blackadder be without it? The search for excellence, as Huw called it, should continue to be our hallmark and our distinguishing feature. We cannot allow it to be thrown away in a headlong rush to adopt the methods of the mass international markets solely aimed at producing miles and miles of universally appealing long-running television wallpaper. Everybody in this industry wants to see it expand. Certainly, let's add more and more choice, more of everything, but not just more of that which makes a man a buck. And if that is elitism, put me down for a seat in the front row, preferably next to Huw Weldon. Thank you very much.